Also in 1187, so this is a very fateful year. So Richard forms an alliance with the King of France. They both take the cross. At the same time this is happening, the greatest warrior in the history of Islam is a man known as Saladin, or Al-Saladin. We tend to Americanize it to Saladin. He essentially becomes the caliph of Egypt and Syria, the Holy Lands, that whole area. So he fights a battle against a Crusader army at a place called the Horns of Hattin. And he wipes out the Crusader army. And the Crusader army, by the way, is headed by a guy named Guy de Lusignan. And we're going to talk about him more as we go along. But it's a devastating defeat for the Crusaders. It's the greatest defeat they've had. So Guy de Lusignan is interestingly enough, a little historical connection, is a vassal of Richard of Lionheart. So he's the guy that gets his clock cleaned by Saladin. Saladin, I don't think, wiped out the army, and Lusignan was ransomed off and allowed to live. But it was a devastating defeat for the Crusaders. And then Saladin takes Jerusalem on October 2nd, 1187. So now you have Richard and Philip are taking the cross against this background of this new caliph in the Middle East who has destroyed the main Crusader army there and has taken Jerusalem. So the scene is set. It's going to be several years before anything happens, but the scene is set for a conflagration that has probably never been seen before or since. It's also, there's some irony, I suppose, that here you have what are probably considered the two greatest warriors of the Middle Ages, and they're contemporaries of each other. You have Saladin to the Muslims, you have Richard of Lionheart to the Christians. They're about the same age, they die within a few months of each other, so they really are contemporaries. And both of these guys just happen to be around at about the same time. And how many of you remember the movie Kingdom of Heaven? If some of you remember that, saw that. That is mostly about this period of time. Remember in that one of the things happens is the siege of Jerusalem. Well, that's all described in that movie. So that movie is about the period of time up to Richard of Lionheart coming to the Crusades, but does not include Richard of Lionheart. And most of that movie is fairly accurate because there were competing kings for the title of King of Jerusalem, and they were fighting each other as much as they were fighting the Muslims and all of that. Okay, what's next? 1189, so this is 2 years later, and Richard and Philip haven't quite got around to massing an army to go to the Holy Lands yet because they're too busy trying to defeat Richard's father in England. So in 1189, Richard and Philip Augustus defeat Henry II's army, and Henry dies shortly after. From what I can see, he doesn't die from wounds from the battle, but he does die shortly after. So Henry's army are defeated, and shortly after, Richard of Lionheart is crowned King of England. So this starts off a series of events, which is why he is in this discussion today. In 1190, Richard of Lionheart sets out for the Holy Land. He does not have a huge army. He's got about 4,000 knights. He's got about 4,000 men at arms. He does have 100 ships, though, which is a big force for that time period. And as it turns out, it's good that he has the 100 ships because he's got to knock over a couple islands on the way. So he sets out for the Holy Lands, but he's the King of England, right? So who's going to run England while he's away? So he leaves some regents to rule England in his absence. Because he thinks his brother John is a sleazebag, he does not make him. This does create some tension between the brothers. September 1190. Remember, they're on their way to the Crusades. Well, there's two islands between them and the Crusades. One is Sicily and one is Cyprus. So what the heck are they doing fighting in Sicily and Cyprus? Now we get to, remember I said that Richard is fiercely loyal to the women in his life, especially his mother, Eleanor of Aquitaine, and his sister, whose name was Joan. Joan was married to King William II of Sicily. King William II dies. The line of succession should have gone to someone else, but again, a third cousin on Uncle Elmo's side seizes the throne after William II dies. He then commits a very stupid error. He throws the queen of the dead king into prison and steals all her money. The dead queen, you get this yet? Is the sister of Richard the Lionheart, who just happens to be arriving in Sicily around that time with 100 ships and a French army and an English army. This sets the scene for some very unpleasant business on the island of Sicily. Richard Lionheart gets there and he is furious when he finds out that his sister has been dissed. And we won't go into the whole thing, but in time he does indeed take over Sicily. His sister is removed from jail. The Lionheart gets hold of the money that was stolen from her, which is supposedly 20,000 ounces of gold. Imagine what that's worth today. And he puts Sis on a ship, and then has a second ship, a treasure ship with all the gold on it. And then he leaves Sicily to start heading toward the Holy Lands. There is a big storm. The storm scatters the fleet. Some of the ships are destroyed. His sister's ship is washed up on the shores of Cyprus. His sister, Joan, is then captured by the dictatorial ruler of Cyprus and put into prison. Shortly after,
not so well for Sicily.
Shortly after, who arrives? Richard the Lionheart and Philip Augustus. Richard goes bonkers. He conquers Cyprus. He is soon crowned king of Cyprus. So, number one rule, don't diss his mom or his sister because you get really ticked off. So these are two amazing events. Now sometimes people kind of poo-poo these and say they're not important. If you look on a map, here's the Holy Lands. Here's Cyprus in the middle of the Mediterranean. If you're going to attack the Holy Lands by sea, Cyprus is right there in the middle. The Lionheart takes over Cyprus. He becomes king. I should mention Guy de Lusignan, who I said would be returning to our story. He actually leads the Lionheart's troops when he takes over Cyprus. The Lionheart doesn't even bother to personally lead his troops in this particular battle. Keep in mind, he's going to the Holy Lands to fight who?
Saladin.
Saladin. He wants to test himself against the greatest of the Muslim warriors. He doesn't want to fight some tin-horn dictator in Cyprus, so his vassal Guy de Lusignan comes over to Cyprus, leads the Lionheart's troops, and he takes over. In the midst of all this, on May 12th, 1191, Richard marries Berengaria of Navarre in Cyprus, and Richard is crowned king of Cyprus. So now with all of his other titles, Duke of Aquitaine, Count of Poitiers, King of England, he is now also King of Cyprus. But I think we can say that none of these titles really mean anything to him other than the fact that he gives him authority to do what he is about to do. 1191. He lands at Acre, and there is a battle already going on. And the battle includes Guy de Lusignan, it includes Conrad of Montserrat. Richard arrives with Philip Augustus. By the way, Frederick Barbarossa was heading toward this battle when he drowns in a river on the way to fight the Crusades. So how would history have been different if Barbarossa had gotten there? So Philip and Richard arrive. The battle's already going on, but the battle at that point isn't really between the Crusader armies and Saladin. It's between the Crusader armies and some local Muslim armies. And Saladin's kind of there, off in the distance, but he's not the primary guy fighting this battle.